Sin will take you farther than you want to go, teach you more than you want to know, cost you more than you want to pay, and keep you longer than you want to stay. We see sin demonstrated in the book of Jonah, the best known of the minor prophets. He's the only minor prophet that has miracles in his story. He's the only preacher in the Bible that hoped to be a failure and no one would respond to his preaching. He is a preacher whose name means dove, and he flew far away from where God wanted him to go. God said, "Arise and go preach in Nineveh." That was the capital of Assyria. Those were the enemies of God's people at that time, 775 BC. So he got in a boat and went toward Tarshish, 2,000 miles away, as far as he thought he could get from his responsibility. But it's easier to run away from God than stay away from God. So God chased him down, sent a storm, and the ship was near sinking. The superstitious men on the boat wondered who on the boat was the reason for this great storm, and they quizzed everybody. They came to Jonah. Jonah had been asleep down in the under part of the ship. They woke him up. He said, "Oh yeah, it's me. I'm running away from God. I'm a preacher. He told me to go preach, but I didn't want to." And so they said, "Well, pray to your God." And didn't do any good because he was impenitent. And so he said, "You're going to have to throw me over." And they didn't want to do it. But they decided it was better to do that than everybody drown, so they threw him in the ocean. And they thought they were sacrificing him to his God, I guess. But God had prepared a great fish that came up and swallowed him. And he was 3 days, 3 nights in the fish's belly. And then the fish vomited him out on the bank, and God came back with the same command he had given him earlier: "Go preach what I bid you to the people of Nineveh." And this time he went, and when he went, they repented from the king all the way down. Sackcloth and ashes. Everybody decided that they did not want to be destroyed, and they believed the prophet of God. And he was disappointed, though, so he sat down across from the city to see if maybe they would relapse. But they did not relapse, and God caused a gourd to come up and shade him under that great sun. Nineveh's built, if it weren't for irrigation, it would not be a city. It's right on the edge of the desert. So that's a very arid region, very hot. And then the Sirocco's wind comes in, the east wind, and blows on Jonah. And he's just miserable because his gourd dies. And God is using that plant as an illustration. He said, "You love that gourd more than you love those people. I mean, you didn't even plant the gourd. It just grew up and then it died, and you're upset because you were so fond of it. But those people over there, many of whom are innocent children, you don't even care. You want them to all die." All right, that's the story of the book of Jonah. We're pretty familiar with it, but I want to focus on the 3rd verse where Jonah runs away from God. He gets on the devil's boat. You could call that boat the devil's boat, and he represents all of us, because everybody's taken a ride on the devil's boat at some time, and many people stay on that boat. The Bible says all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, so everybody gets on the boat, Romans 3:23. But if they stay on the boat, the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is offered, and anybody can get off the boat. Now what we're going to do is look at 3 ideas from Jonah 1:3. And then we're going to go to the New Testament and pull ourselves into the story in a bigger picture to see illustrations and applications of these 3 principles. But you can read along with me if you want to in Jonah 1 verse 3, and let's pull out 3 ideas. "But Jonah rose up to flee into Tarshish from the presence of the Lord." Well, that's a mistake. The earth is filled with the Lord. You can't go beyond where the Lord is, but in his mind, he's leaving the land of the Jews and he's leaving the presence of God. Then it continues, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. That's our first point. The devil's boat is always at the port. Let's see a second one. You continue reading. "So he paid the fare thereof. The devil's boat is expensive to ride, and went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Now the third point is, whenever you get on the devil's boat only goes one direction, and that's downstream. And you see that eventually it ends up in a storm. And that is illustrative of what all of us experience in sin. Our first point, and I'll go through these quickly because I want to bring the New Testament into it, but let's make the application so we all know what to look for when we bring our world into the same story. So the first point is the devil's boat is always in at the port. You know, Jonah lived 65 miles away from Joppa, Gath-Hepher, so it probably took him 3 days to get there. And this isn't a major port that you would expect a boat going to Tarshish all the time, anytime you went there. And yet it just so happens when he gets there, he's able to make passage on a boat going where he wants to go. That illustrates that if you and I want to sin, sin is available. Temptation is always around us. You know, if you were working today and you decided you wanted to go get drunk tonight instead of come to a church service, was there anybody at work that would have gone with you? Let's say you want to step out on your spouse. Is there anybody in your circle of acquaintances that would entertain an illicit, secretive, don't let me know this, but you might not should say it beside your spouse either, right? No, we all understand what we're talking about. There are people who will sin if you want to sin. You know, if you do not want to come to services on Sunday, the golf course is open, right? And probably you've got 3 buddies that would go with you to play golf. There's always opportunity to sin, and there are people that will go with you to sin. The devil keeps the door to sin and temptation open. We're not ignorant of his devices. 2 Corinthians 2:11. He can even appear as an angel of light, making that which is evil seem to be good, the right thing to do. 2 Corinthians 11:14. He is walking about as a lion, a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Somehow he can find us whenever we're in the mood or being tempted to sin. He can provide that opportunity. That's the first lesson. Jonah found the boat at the port. So the application of this is that we must keep our guard up all the time. You can't let your guard down because the devil's around, because there are opportunities to sin. So how do you keep your guard up? Well, here are the practical points you could add to this. Number one, ere you left your room this morning, did you think to pray? Right? Prayer is a powerful antidote to temptation. Matthew 6:13, Jesus taught us to pray, lead me not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. Now, it's not safe to leave your bed, certainly your house, without praying that every day. Because Jesus wouldn't have given us that command unless there was power to it. Now, I've asked this question a lot of different places, so I'm not asking you tonight, but I'm going to tell you what you would say if I gave you opportunity to say, because it's always the same. How many times are you tempted to sin in a day? Okay, women, you would probably say about 10. That's typically what it said. Men, you would probably say 100. That's true. A lot of that is the visual stimuli that are around men in our culture all the time. Now, if I do not pray the prayer to deliver me from evil, how many temptations am I going to face today? All of them. 10, 100, whatever it is. If I pray that, is it going to be the same number of temptations today? Be careful how you answer that. Because if you say yes, then why did Jesus tell us to pray it? Why is it a part of the model prayer that he... Well, certainly it's not going to remove all the temptation. We all have to be tempted and we all have to face the challenges that prove our faith is real. But certainly it will be less. So pray, number one. Number two, study the Bible to know the wiles of the devil, Ephesians 6:11. Have you ever thought about, probably not, but think with me for a minute about visiting the devil's office? If he has an office, imagine a filing cabinet in it. And find the label on the drawer that has your last name in that drawer. Pull it out, pull out the folder, open it up. Would you be surprised to find a date and a temptation and a notation? Tried, this temptation, failed. Another date, another temptation, failed. Another date, another temptation, failed. Another date, another temptation, success. Do you reckon the devil's smart enough to come back to that one? You know, Abraham was tempted to lie about his wife. Did the devil come back to that? Genesis 12, Genesis 20. Yeah, he came back to the same temptation and Abraham failed a second time. So we have to look at the wiles of the devil. How has he been successful in tempting me in the past? Do I need to fortify my faith in that area of my life? Are there scriptures in the Bible that I can memorize that will fortify me about that? Are there any barriers or safeguards that I can build into? You know, the wise man told his son, don't go down the street where that woman lives, right? Yeah. So is there anything I need to change about my routine, my habits, what I look at on my phone or what I'm entertained by that would keep me from being tempted in the way that I was tempted and failed before? Number 3, how is it that I can avoid temptation, keep my guard up against temptation? Watch, my friends. 1 Corinthians 15:33, evil communications corrupt good morals. So, Peter did okay when he was with the apostles, but when he was around that fire the night that Jesus was arrested, he failed because of the friends around him, the people around him. So watch your friends. Number 4, and the last one. Watch the portals to the mind. Watch the portals to the mind. There are primarily 2. All 5 senses are portals to the mind, but there are primarily 2. The eyes and the ears. I have to watch the things that can create in me a thought, because the devil can use tempting thoughts to sin. About 85% of stimuli come through our eyes, so that's the main one. Put a door at the portal of the eye, but also the ears. What music do I listen to? What conversations do I hear? Or what speech am I around? All those things can impact my ability to let my guard down. Those things, I must be careful to keep the guard up. I'm on a battlefield every day. I might say it a different way. I am a battlefield every day because the battle goes on right here. And I'm on a battlefield because that's trying to influence. Number 2, you find that this text teaches us that Jonah had to pay the fare. The Bible says the way of the transgressor is hard. Proverbs 13:15. I've been teaching 2 Samuel today. We're in the section, you know, the first David ruled for 40 years, and the first half of his reign was all assent. It's almost like he could do no wrong. Everything he touched turned to gold. The second half of his reign, the last 20 years, were a descent. It's almost like he could do nothing right. There was always a problem on his plate. You know what the pivot is between those two? 2 Samuel 11. Bathsheba. David sinned with her, murdered her husband, took her to be his wife. The child died. And he should have died under the law, but God commuted the sentence. He broke 4 of the, maybe 5 of the 10 commandments, but 2 of them were capital offenses. Adultery and murder. He also lied. He coveted his neighbor's wife. So he was guilty of a lot. But God's prophet said, you're not going to die. but the sword's never going to depart from your house. And that's the section right now that I'm in, chapters. We were in 15 through 19 today, but we just covered. And I've written in my Bible several times. Like today we studied when Absalom got his hair in the tree, and he was swinging by his hair, and his animal mule went out from under him, and Joab came and threw 3 darts in his heart, and then the 10 young men finished the job there. And then the runners came. First one to arrive was Ahimaaz. He was not authorized to say anything, but he got permission to run, and he got there and he said, basically, the good guys won. And David's question was, is the young man Absalom safe? He lied. He said, I don't know. There was a tumult when I left that was going on. He knew, but he didn't want to say. So then Cushai is running, and he catches up, and he makes his report, and David asks him the same question, is the young man Absalom safe? And he says, very tactfully, I wish that all the enemies of my Lord the King were as that young man is. Dead. And then David, oh, Absalom, Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I died for thee, my son Absalom. He went into a chamber nearby and he wept. Even in the next chapter, same attitude, verse 5. I wrote there at this is 2 Samuel 16:5. I wrote beside that, was a night with Bathsheba worth it, David? When he had to flee from his own palace in the rebellion, the coup, and he's weeping and going barefoot. Shimei is throwing rocks and curses and dust at him. Was it worth it to have a night with Bathsheba, David? Well, you can read the rest of the book, and there are more problems than that. But all of them came from whatever amount of time he was with her, and he sent her back thinking that was over, but it was just starting. Now, if you could ask David, if he could roll back that story, and if you could walk beside him on the rooftop that day and say, David, you're about to see a woman on the other side. Don't look, David. And if he knew what was going to happen, he would not go over there and look, would he? All right, David teaches us a lesson. Romans 15:4 says, things written aforetime are written for our learning. So this is in the Bible for a reason. This might not be the temptation we're tempted with, but it might be. But whatever the temptation is, there is a price to be paid for it, and it's like a buffet line. You don't pay until you get to the end, right? So you can enjoy the pleasures of sin for the moment, for a time, but then the check comes due. And David's paying that check the rest of his life. Now, the same thing is true with us. We could take whatever sin it is. And I'll click off some ways that we or sinners have to pay the price. One, sometimes it's financial. You think about the vices that men pay for and how much they pay over a lifetime. Alcohol, smoking, pornography. Well, you start adding that up. Just take alcohol, for instance. Those who drink on average 1 drink a day. That's 1 paycheck a year for an average salary person. Heavy drinkers drink 10 drinks a day. That's $5,000 in a year. That $5,000 times the years that your children are at home, 5 times 18, that would pay for their college, wouldn't it? Drunk up, gone. Sometimes it costs time. You think about what Jonah experienced. It took 3 days to get to Joppa, on the ship out into the ocean, 3 days in the fish's belly, and then back to the bank, and then he had to walk where he was going. So 2 weeks, maybe a month of his life lost because he ran away from God. But that's not anything compared to what a lot of people do. We sometimes sing that song, years I spent in vanity and pride. Carry not my years. Some give the devil all the teenage years. Some give the devil the young adult years. And some just stay with the devil all the way, stay on the boat. A lifetime spent in vain. Well, he lost the respect. He lost his self-respect. How much respect do you think he had for himself when he's human vomit wrapped in seaweed on the bank coming out of the fish? What about the respect of others? What about the people on the boat that found out that he was the reason they were about to die? What about the respect of God? That's my prophet running away from me. Mark 8:38 says that if we're ashamed of him, then he'll be ashamed of us when he comes. He nearly cost the souls of the people of Nineveh. Somebody says, my sin's not hurting anybody but me. That's not true. It's never been true. It's not true. You could tell yourself that, but it's not true. And the people that are hurt the worst are the people that are closest to you. Let's just say it's a husband, the wife finds it very hard to go to church services by herself, sit by herself. Sometimes he wants to do something else on Sunday. She has to say, no, that's his church day. What about those children that are growing up in that home that's divided, one believer, one unbeliever, and then that young man that looks up to his father gets to a certain age and dad says, let's go fishing tomorrow. Mom says, no, remember tomorrow's Sunday. Oh, let's let him decide. That's not a decision that a 10-year-old boy needs to make. Oh, it's hurting. It's lowering the spiritual temperature of the nation, of the community. It's also hurting those that if he had been faithful, he would have influenced positively, like those he would have taught in Bible classes, or those who would have led to the Lord during those years he was walking away from the Lord. Oh, it hurts. So all those things are costs that we pay when we go into sin. And then we think about the devil's boat always ends in a storm. In this case, they have to throw him overboard and God spares his life. I think we will go with me over to Proverbs 23. And let's just talk about a storm-inducing beverage. A storm-inducing beverage. So go with me to Proverbs 23. I'm going to read the middle of it, the heart of it, and then we'll back out of it and see the context. But Proverbs 23, let's read verse 30, verse 29 together. So, the alcohol is served at the party or the bar or taken out of the refrigerator. There's a lively atmosphere. Everybody's having a good time. There's laughter, there's noise, there's fun. It doesn't seem dangerous. It doesn't seem like something that's going to bring difficulty, problems, and challenges into one's life. But the wise man goes past the initiation. And he talks about what happens after the first drink. Let's read this together, then we'll talk about it a little more. Verse 29, who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? Anybody want any of those things? Anybody, your life's going so well right now, you just wish you had some trouble. You feel so well, you wish something hurt. You can see so well, you wish your eyes were glazed over and you couldn't see. Your relationships are all positive and good and strong, and you just wish you could get in a fight with somebody. What's in that bottle? That's all in the bottle. I've heard a couple times lately, gospel preachers say something I think that they need to reconsider. Not anybody here. I heard it said that it might be unwise to drink alcohol, but I don't think I could call it a sin. I call it a sin because the book calls it a sin. Let me show you in this chapter. Social drinking is a sin, heavy drinking is a sin, long-term drinking is a sin, and moderate drinking is a sin. I'll show you that 4 times in this chapter. So start at verse 20 with me. Verse 20 says, "Be not among wine bibbers." That's social drinking. Don't be in a social drinking context. Number 2, hard drinking is a sin. That's the verse that we just read. Number 3, long-term drinking is a sin. Notice verse 30. It says, "They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine." And then moderate drinking is condemned in verse 31. "Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it is in the cup, when it giveth this coloring cup, when it moveth itself aright, at the last." And I circle those 3 words in my Bible, at the last, because that's the perspective that we should look at with sin, at the last. Where's this leading? What's going to be the result of it? But let's think about that. Look not at wine when it's in the cup. If a parent told a child, "I don't want you to even look at drugs," does that mean it's okay to use drugs socially? Would anybody interpret that in that way? Well, how would we interpret the same phrase, "Look not at the wine"? It doesn't mean it's wrong to go down that aisle in Kroger, as the alcohol. Or go in to pay for your gas in a station that has all these advertisements for alcohol. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, don't put it in a cup and look at it thinking I'm going to taste it. That looks good. That smells, I think I'd like this. He said, don't get that close to it. Does that sound like it'd be okay to drink a little of it? Somebody says, but Jesus made alcohol, so it must be all right. Be careful. That's John 2, 1 through 11. Before we discuss that briefly, I'm just going to ask you a question. What would you think about parents who had had a wedding party at their house for their daughter and new son-in-law, and they provided 120 gallons of alcohol for that party? Would you say those are really respectful, good parents, right? Well, go to John 2 and see if that's not what Jesus did. 120 gallons of something, but it wasn't alcohol. Now, the word oinos that's used here is not fermented by the definition of the word. It has to be determined by the context. So, long story short is, Jesus provided not what we would call wine, but what we would call grape juice, sweet drink, for those who were at that party when they ran out. All right, now I'm going to go to the New Testament. Go with me over to 1 John, and let's spend a little bit of time in 1 John 2. But on the way by, I want to stop at James chapter 1. So let's spend just a minute in James, and then we'll spend the balance of our time in John. Go to James 1, and let's see the sin process. We talked about temptation. We talked about sin. We talked about the results of it. But let's see what James says, how he describes that process. Because if we know the devil's playbook, we're better able to defeat him at the game that he wants us to play. So this is beginning in verse 13. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. So God is not the source of our temptation. The next verse says, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. So the first step of the process is attention, to get the attention. The word man there is not gender specific, every person. But the emphasis is on every. The person who's standing before you, the person who's sitting beside you, every person in this room, all of us are tempted. Every man is tempted. Now the next part, after the devil gets our attention, then what are we going to do with that? Are we going to turn away from it? Are we going to resist the temptation? Are we going to give into it? If we give into it, drawn away of his own lust and enticed, that's a fishing word. You take a hook and you cover it with a worm or some kind of bait, You throw it in the water. Now, you and I wouldn't really be tempted much to eat a worm. That's not very tasty looking to us. But to the fish, when he sees it, that's breakfast, right? That's lunch. That's what he likes to eat. So he sees the worm, but he doesn't see the hook. So the devil appeals to our desires, but he hides the hook. There's always a hook in sin. Enticed, then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin when it is finished bringeth forth death. Word death there means condemnation. So that's how we get separated from God, because we give in to sin. But thanks be to God that He made it possible to come out of sin and be forgiven of sin, and gives us the ability to resist temptation and be forgiven for the momentary lapses that we have into sin, 1 John 1, 6 through 10. But let's go to 1 John 2 now. Let's spend, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, talking about these three categories of sin, so we can identify more specifically what it is the devil's trying to get us to do. Let's go into 1 John 2:16. For all that is in the world, well, what is in the world that's separated from God, that we're not supposed to love? All that is in the world is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It's not of the Father, it is of the world. We'll go in reverse order here, so we'll start with the pride of life. There are four sins that fall, predominant sins that fall into that category. They are boasting, achievement, status, and pride. Romans 1:30 lists boasting in a long list of what we would call terrible sins that condemn the Gentiles. 2 Timothy 3:2 fits there. James 4:16 fits there. A good illustration of this is Acts 25:23, when Paul is called up from the prison, maybe wearing his chains, maybe he hasn't had a bath in 2 weeks or a month, I don't know. He's wearing ragged clothes, and he walks in, and there he's before the king and his queen. And the Bible describes how Bernice came in there with great pomp. You probably haven't used that word yet today. But great pomp means everybody look at me. Dressed to the nines. Maybe they make an announcement. Maybe they play the trumpets. Maybe everybody stands at attention. She walks down that aisle wanting every eye on her. That's what lust of the ego is. The pride of life is everybody look at me. Now, we can do it in different ways. We can dress in such a way, either too much or too little, that draws attention to us. I might ask, what did you preach last Sunday here?
No, you did.
No, I mean the Sunday before.
Yes.
I guess it would work with me too. So what did Scott wear the last Sunday he preached? What color? What kind of tie was it? Anybody having trouble with that? That's exactly the way it should be. Because the emphasis is not on the speaker, is it? It's on the God we're worshiping. Now, what if he had worn a purple suit with a yellow tie? Would you remember that? Probably. You see the point? You know, some guys do it with their trucks. I was in a hotel somewhere, maybe Kentucky, Ohio, maybe. It was a half mile from the interstate. And I heard this noise. I said, you know what it was? It was some guy's truck on the interstate a half mile away. I heard it inside my hotel. Why is it so loud? Is it because he couldn't afford to put a muffler? No. It's like, everybody look at me. I'm driving by. What's that? Pride of life. So we don't want to draw the attention to ourselves. We want to turn the spotlight on God. Now the next one is the lust of the eyes, going in reverse order. There are also 4 applications of this. Number 1 is materialism. 2 is envy. 3 is covetousness. 4 is pornography. Those are 4 primary applications of lust of the eyes. We sometimes probably associate it with lust of the flesh with the last one, and that one is a trigger for it. But really it's much bigger than that. And if you're only going to use one word to describe pride of life, it would be ostentation. If you're only going to use one word to describe lust of the eyes, it would be materialism. I see it, I want it. So, sometimes that shows up with buying stuff that we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like, right? Sometimes get on Amazon or Etsy or whatever it is, and next thing you know, there's a delivery truck backing up and unloading boxes on the porch. And maybe again tomorrow or next week, and then the boxes, what's in the, I don't know. It was on sale though. Materialism. Happiness, fulfillment in life, satisfaction doesn't come in a box. It doesn't come from Amazon. It comes from the Lord. Lust of the eyes. We talked about 85% of our stimuli come through our eyes, and so we have to be careful what we put in front of our eyes, that we don't take something that doesn't belong to. Covetousness is a form of idolatry. It can trigger stealing, or it can trigger the poor stewardship of wasting money that could be used for a better purpose on something that doesn't have a real purpose in our lives. Let's think about number 3, the lust of the flesh. There are also 4 applications of these. There is sensual pleasure, gluttony, alcohol, and comfort. Those 4. Let's deal with comfort first. Comfort is Amos 6:1. Woe to those that are at ease in Zion. When I desire comfort over conviction, if I'm willing to compromise truth in order to maintain status or not to endure pain, then that's a lust of the flesh. Alcohol, we just covered that one. Let's talk about gluttony. This is not anything I think I've ever preached on before last week. But I decided that since it's in the Bible, we ought to talk about it. So let's talk about it. But I will say this to start with. One can be falsely accused or thought of as a glutton when that's farthest thing from the truth. Have you ever thought that Jesus was accused of being a glutton? Matthew 11:19. So just because I may be overweight doesn't mean that I am guilty of the sin of gluttony. That's a different thing. Now, it could contribute to that, but that's not the visible sign of that. So let me give you, let's go through 5 Bible verses about it, and then we'll look at 6 strategies on it. 5 Bible verses. The first one I just gave you, we should be careful not to judge because even Jesus was accused of this. Number 2, Proverbs 23:1-3 says, if you are a man given to appetite, put a knife to your throat. There are 2 key ideas there. One is to know yourself. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. If one of mine is I'm given to appetite, to use the wise man's words, then I take steps to limit that, to not go too far. I put a knife to my throat. I push away from the table. In the same chapter, Proverbs 23:20, it says, be not among winebibbers or be not among gluttonous people. So watch your context and be around people that are strong in the area where you're weak, so it doesn't contribute whatever. It would be true of other sins, but in this case, it would be gluttony. Now you go to the New Testament, and I will ask you to turn to this verse if you want to, Luke 21:34. Beware of surfeiting. Do you know that word? That's a King James word. I don't know how it's translated in I didn't look in other translations. But Luke 21, did I say 21:30? What did I say? 21:34. 21:34. Read this with me if you want to, or you can just listen. But it says, and take heed to yourselves. So we pay attention to ourselves. We're trying to get to heaven, right? So anything that's hindering me from getting to heaven, I want to get rid of that because I don't want any stumbling block. I don't want anything holding me back. I want to go there more than anything else. So take heed to yourself, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged, overwhelmed, oversatiated, overcharged with, there's the word, surfeiting. Do you know that word? It means overindulgence in appetite. Or, have you ever, I've heard this used lately, I think mostly in jest, but have you ever heard the phrase, I'm in a food coma? You know that? That's what this means. It means to have overeaten to the point that I am just foggy-eyed. So there is, on the one hand, appetite. The next word has to do with the drink. They're both in the verse, and drunkenness. So drunkenness is inebriate, is intoxicating, it takes away the senses. But the same thing to a lesser degree in a different way can happen with overindulging on appetite. And then the last part of it, in the cares of this life. And so that day come upon you unaware. So you're not prepared for Jesus to come back. Now, if you're taking notes tonight, put down also 1 Peter 4, 1 through 4, that fits as a parallel verse to Luke 21:34. The other verse to make on your list of 5 would be Galatians 5:20, which says that one of the sins of the flesh is banquetings. And that's the idea here of a reveling, of a wild party. All right, let me give you the 6 coping strategies, and then we'll probably have to wind this up. But let's go through. These would also work for alcohol, probably for other sins, but I'll just give you these for practical points. Number 1, eat for nourishment and community, not for pleasure and diversion. Eat for nourishment and community, not for pleasure and diversion. And your verse for that is Proverbs 30, verse 8. Proverbs 30, verse 8. Number 2, avoid addictive foods. Man, the only other time I've preached on this, I mentioned that, like last week or the week before somewhere. Man, I got a lot of conversations about it afterward. People know a lot more about that than I know about it. But whatever addictive foods are, sugar would certainly probably be in that conversation. Avoid them. 1 Corinthians 6:12, I won't be brought under the power of any. The third one is address the underlying issues. Is there a reason why food means more to me than it should? That'd be Proverbs 23:7, which says that we're to understand the issues of life, understand our heart, understand who we are. So there may be something there that this is just a symptom of something deeper. Number 4, practice self-control. That one's obvious, Luke 9:23. Number 5, that's the same thing as pushing away from the table or putting a knife to your throat. The next one is find satisfaction in other things. I really think this verse is interesting, and I'd never thought of it before studying for this. John 4:32, when the disciples came back from the city with food for Jesus, you remember he was hungry when he sent them. But he got to talking to the Samaritan woman at the well, and then she brought out all the people from the city to hear him preach. Do you remember what he responded when they tried to get him to eat? He said, I have meat to eat that you know not of. Does that mean that somebody giving him? That's not what that means. What that means is he forgot to eat. He said, I got other things I'm doing that have taken away my appetite. So find other things to take the place of it. And then the last one, is to develop coping strategies. Proverbs 4:26, ponder the path of your feet. So coping strategies, and there are a lot of those available, not religious necessarily, but that fall into this. All right, and then we won't have time to do much with this, but I'll just give you on the sensual pleasures, the fourth of the four, lust of the flesh. You could put Galatians 5:19 there, and there are four of these: uncleanness, lasciviousness, fornication, and adultery. Uncleanness, King James, is probably not a word we use much, but we use the synonym for it. That's a dirty book or a dirty movie. That's the same idea. So it's something that produces lustful thoughts. Lasciviousness can be that, but it's expanded from that. Conduct that excites lust. So it's not just words, but it's also actions. Like dancing would fall into that category. And then fornication, when used in the same context with adultery as it is here, fornication would be premarital, adultery would be extramarital. Adultery can either be single or double. Single would be one of the two is married, the other single. Double would be both of them are married, but married to somebody else. So there's a lot in the Scriptures, of course, about all those subjects. But if we're going to stay off the devil's boat, then we need to know what his temptations are, what it is that he's trying to get us to do. And maybe the best list of those would be 1 John 2:16, understanding the applications of each of those, because that covers all the gamut. All the temptations that any of us face fall into one of those three categories, sometimes more than one, but they're always on that list. So we can put them there. All right. Let's extend the Lord's invitation. This is the most important part of any sermon. And it's the part sometimes when we're like, well, it's over, I'm ready to go. If we're right with God, I understand that sentiment. But remember that there are different spiritual journeys represented in the room. And so the most important part of any sermon for a person who needs to get right to go to be with God is an opportunity to be right with God. So if that's you tonight, maybe you have been thinking about becoming a Christian and you've been studying with someone about what that means, and maybe you're ready to be baptized tonight, but you're only qualified to be baptized, so this is important. You can only be baptized tonight in that water if four things are true of you or could be true of you before the baptism. One, that you know who Jesus is and believe that He's the Son of God. So you've read the story of Jesus in the Bible. Somebody's taught you virgin birth, perfect life, miracles, teachings, death, burial, resurrection, ascension to heaven. All that's included in hearing the gospel, Romans 10:17. Number two, that you believe in Jesus as the Son of God. Number three, that you're ready to change your life to conform to what He wants it to be. That's what the Bible calls repentance, Luke 13:3. Number four, and if you haven't done this already, then you can do this, and you will do it again before your baptism. That is to confess what you believe about Jesus. Just say out loud what you believe in your heart, because we can't read your heart. So be bold and say, I believe Jesus Christ, Son of God. If those four things are true of you or could be true of you, then you can go down in the water to be baptized, every sin washed away, and you can leave this building tonight wearing the name of Jesus Christ. You're a Christian. If you haven't been a faithful Christian, maybe sins come back into your life and you say, I'm ready to get back. I want to do right. I want to be forgiven. I want to serve God. God doesn't throw us away when we sin. God invites us home, like that prodigal son in Luke 15. And God is calling the prodigal tonight. I don't know if there's anybody in here who needs to answer that call, but you would know that. And if that's the case, then why not respond to the love and the grace of God tonight? And go home and not toss and turn, but sleep like a baby. Be ready to be with God forever in eternity. Decisions that will be celebrated or regretted are made in this room on the judgment day. Celebrated, I'm so glad I took care of that. Regretted, I wish I had taken care of that. So if you're subject to the invitation tonight, you may come while we stand, while we sing.